you can ask me, send it through the chat, and you can send it to me privately, and then if you want, or in public, whichever you want. And then at some point, when Brandon has a break for taking questions, I'll ask or interrupt him at some point if it's related to what he's saying. But we find that's generally the best as far as asking questions go, so everyone's not kind of going at the same time. And yeah, as more people come in, I will add them in as well. And I will turn it over to Brandon now. And Brandon, take it away. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Richard. So the title of this presentation is Best Practices for Using Technology in Film and TV Production. And I was thinking about this specific course because I really believe that technology can help us when we think about having a safer set, having an environment where we have to practice social distancing, where we have to think about things where we can't interact like we normally do. I've been thinking about technology for many years in terms of how it works in film and TV. I started a podcast last year called Go for Production, and we have production managers on there, first ADs, line producers, kind of talk about their philosophy of how they do things. And I've also been blogging. I run a blog called assistantdirecting.com where I have resources and tips, stuff like that. So some of this information is stuff that I've gathered over the years from just trying to learn and figure out as much as I can. So I want to start with kind of a basic question, if my slideshow will go, is why should we productions use and embrace technology? And I came up with 4 different reasons. One, hopefully you'll save money because if you're using the right technology, you hopefully will have a shorter day. Hopefully you're able to keep track of expenses between departments easier. You're going to save time. By using certain technology, you may not have to build a distribution list because it'll already be built. Number 3, create a safer set. So a lot of the technology pieces we're going to talk about today really eliminate the idea that you have to go and physically be near somebody. So for instance, if I was on a show one time where I had to get a piece of paper signed by a producer, and that piece of paper had to, exchange hands about 7 different times before it was finalized, essentially. And but that could have been minimized through, a program like HelloSign or DocuSign. So things like that, and we'll talk about some technologies like that in the presentation. And the last thing I want to think about is this idea that by embracing technology, we can create a better product. And that when you're able to save time, when you're able to save money, you can spend that excess time or excess money on things that are really important. Like maybe you have extra money now, and so you can go get that big balloon light that before you couldn't afford. So I'm just going to kind of go through an overview of different technology, different software, different apps. And I'm not going to talk about every software out there because we don't have that much time. We'll be here all day. So I probably will miss some software, probably will miss some apps. Please forgive me. And there's pros and cons to all the software I'm going to mention, all technology. But for the most part, I'm mentioning things that I've used personally and recommend. And there, you may have some ideas as we go through. So feel free to stop me as we go through each slide. So the first thing I want to talk about is using platforms for distros, sides, watermarking, digital signatures, and more. And there's really 3 main companies that are leading the charge in this space: SetKeeper, ClueGlue, and EP Synchronize. ClueGlue actually is one that I wasn't familiar with until this year, and they're based in Canada. And they have a really affordable platform. Really cool things they're doing with texting, in addition to sending out your call sheet and sides, where you can get a little text from your phone saying, hey, the updated blue call sheet was sent out. And I think features like that are really cool, especially when you're having to make a lot of changes quickly. One thing I like about SetKeeper that they're doing is they're doing a lot of digital document management. So like I was talking about earlier, if you want to get, let's say, a location release signed and then countersigned, they can handle stuff like that. And in terms of EP Synchronize, everybody's familiar with that one. It's been around the longest. It's the most expensive out there. And I know they've been making updates to that platform. But all those devices are able to do the digital sides, watermarking, distro. And I think that really does play a huge benefit in your production team, your production office staff, and it can really help things move in a way that when you're just trying to create a distro from scratch, it can kind of create some hurdles sometimes. Any thoughts, questions on these platforms? We're moving on to the next slide. No? Okay, so the next one I want to think about, here we go, is software for managing background actors. And right now, the only one I really know about is Rabs and runabetterset.com. And what's cool about their software is it has digital vouchers, customized artwork, so the background are filling out their NDA, their entire packet online. So instead of having a big long line at the end of the show where you're having to process people and they may be waiting an hour sometimes, you can check them out instantly. And also you're not having to think about, is their I-9 filled out correctly? Because it is. And the cool thing about Rabs, when we're thinking about creating a safer set, is you're able to minimize the interaction between your staff and your extras and your background actors. The other thing that Rabs is doing is they're also doing training that I believe they're going to update for post-COVID environments where you can have your team experience an online training platform for safety. Another one you guys may be familiar with is Sync on Set. This is primarily for, our department, costume, makeup, hair, set deck. What's great about Sync on Set, though, is that it can really help them manage their continuity, manage their budgeting. And, sometimes I've been on projects where a makeup artist will say, I'm using Sync on Set, and they just take it upon themselves to use it. And other times it can be from the production down, where it's the producer, production manager saying, hey, let's use this program, this software, to create a better environment where we can really tackle continuity and not have that Coke can in the Western. So I think, if as production managers, as line producers, we can sometimes be champions and to things like Sync on Set. And sometimes it takes, having a group meeting and saying, hey, I think this program will really help us all. It's going to help us get our budgets up to date. It's going to help us to track our expenses, et cetera, et cetera. Another one, you guys are probably familiar with these as well, is PEX and Cache. They're the two leading companies that deal with P cards. So I don't know about you, but it's so painful to deal with petty cash. The last show I was on, I only, withdrew like $1,000 in petty cash before I was able to get Cache working, because it's just so painful to keep track of petty cash. I'm not going to list them here, but almost every payroll company out there is really updating their platforms with digital time cards for both crew and cast. Now, sometimes these are optional and you can still use the paper system. But what I've seen from a lot of the recent ones is you're able to do not just the digital time cards, but the digital start packets. So for instance, I can update the crew deal memo. I can have the I-9, W-9, W-2. I can have the whole thing in one online submission instead of having them come to the production office, grab this packet, fill it out, scan it in. If I have the digital option, then I think there's a lot of benefits to really keeping pace on what's happening. Questions so far as we're going through some of these pretty fast?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple, Brandon. One question is, when you were talking about the Run a Better Set and digital vouchers and things for background, is that something that syncs up with your payroll company or with accounting, or what's the process if you enter the vouchers digitally, I guess, and where do they go from there?
Yeah, so I haven't used Rabs personally, but I've heard great things from them, and it does sync with their accounting systems. The other thing that they're working on right now is being able to work with SAG actors. Right now, the platform is only for non-union, but they're hoping to roll out the ability to work with SAG.
Okay, all right. And then another question, do all of these, or the ones that you've worked with at least, do they require internet access? Or if you're, like, I know, myself and a couple others on this chat, when we were doing a show last year, we were frequently in places with no cell service and no internet access. Is it something that you can work offline and then it connects to, once it connects, it uploads, or?
I'm not sure about all of the software. I do know that has been an issue for me as well, like working on a Western or something that has spotty cell service. I think, a lot of these programs, if your Basecamp can have internet access, you can have some type of hub, then that's the main thing, is being able to check in and check out. And then once you go to set, you have no internet, it's not that big a deal because you're not needing to communicate that much at that point. The Rabs can also, I know that they can connect with the costume department, different things like that in terms of, so you're not having to pass out, hold on to a voucher. They're able to say, hey, you picked out this costume or this prop.
Okay. And then one other question is, do you know, do the background actors, do they do their I-9 or their voucher on their phone or online, or is it something that you in production would still be entering in for that, or entering in, and it just checks to see if mistakes are somewhere, or those extras castings, that's something maybe would have them do?
So they would do it all online. I plead the fifth in knowing the process completely in terms of whether or not they have to show their ID to production. They might have to do that, or it might be optional for production to verify it. That's been kind of the case with most of these digital payroll companies, is you can upload your driver's license, social, if you want to. It's an optional thing sometimes, and then the production can choose to verify it in person.
Okay. And then also, you may not know the answer to this, but Heather was asking, is Rabs the company offering safety or COVID training? Have you followed any of?
They're offering safety training. I think right now the COVID training is still unknown because those rules and regulations haven't been really released yet. So, but I think they will be offering something like that when this is up and running.
Okay, cool. All right. That's it for now. Thanks.
Okay. So going back to Video Village. So one thing that we can also think about is this idea of creating a Video Village system that is not dependent on just one monitor. So devices like the Teradek Serve Pro allow up to 10 devices. You can mix your iPad and iPhone. So that's a really cool idea if you think about, we have to have a social distance village where they can be in multiple rooms and you can still see the monitor. So your makeup artist can still see it, costumes can still see it without having to be crammed around the director. The other cool thing that I love about this idea and this concept that a lot of productions are using is that let's say you're the second AD and you're setting background and you've got a couple hundred people. You can take your iPad with you and you're over in the corner. You're looking at to see if you're setting that group that is next to the main actor and if it's making sense, if it's working, versus having to run back to Village or getting on radio to see, hey, is this working? So I think there's a lot of benefits to that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of using Google Suites more effectively. The nice thing about Google is obviously it's free, but there's a lot of things that are on there that you may not use. So for me, I like to use the Google Calendar, and I create a new calendar for each show. And I do that by using a specific Gmail address for that production. So whatever filmproduction@gmail.com, and then I create that show. In terms of the calendar, I'm able to put certain dates like production meeting, the tech scout. And yes, it's not for everybody on the crew, but it's able to be way far in advance so that these department heads can know and have a rough idea versus waiting for every week to come by. And so you can also, on the Google Calendar, you can take the link, the subscribe link, and I like to send that out through my production coordinator and say, hey, subscribe to this Google Calendar. We'll keep updating it. So I can put meetings with the director. I can put important things so that the core people that need to know are aware. Like I mentioned earlier, you can always have that specific your production@gmail.com. Forms is one thing that I like to use, and I've used it on a couple small films where I didn't have any budget for extras. And one time I was in Georgia and I was doing a very small movie, and we needed like 3,000 or 4,000 extras. And so I created this form that had like your name, height, weight, your gender, all this information. And then also it had like what days you're available to be an extra, what roles you want to be an extra. I went to the news and we did a story about the film, and they put that link with that Google form. It was like, I had like a tiny URL with the link. And overnight we had thousands of people submit. And at the end of the day, I had about 5,000 people. I couldn't even use them all. It was crazy. But Google Forms is a really cool device. I don't know if everybody uses that much. The other thing that's neat about the Forms feature is, let's say you need detailed information for, let's say you have 100 actors and you want to get all their sizes. Well, you can create a little size form that has this, the 7 main size requirements, and have them all filled out. And you may get 90% of the actors do that. And then it's less work, less effort on your costume designer to make those calls, those emails. You're able to get all that into one spreadsheet. And finally, when talking about Google Suites, I want to think about this idea of using Google Sheets to create your production Bible. I know many of you use this already, but there's a really great template from filmmakersproductionbible.com that I've been using for years, and I've kind of customized it, where I take a Google Sheet and then I create a day-to-days for the crew on my Google Sheet, so that I know if I have 5 grips and I only need 3 of them for the show, but on these 2 days I need, the grip 4 and grip 5, I can schedule them in using kind of a day-to-day system. So check that out. Any questions about Google?
Yeah, actually, we did have one question about PECs, which I missed.
Okay.
We were talking about that. But does it have to be production-wide, or can individual departments use PECs if they choose to?
Well, you have to, let's just say you wanted to use PECs just for our department. You could do that. Or you could do it production-wide. So, you just basically transfer funds to PECs or Cache, and then decide how many cards you want, what's the limit on each card, and what the restrictions are. So, for a lot of projects, you're going to have cards for crafty and art department, but you may not give it to all of our department. Maybe it's just the art buyer and the set deck, and I think for departments like makeup, they may only have a couple purchases. It may not be worth it to give them a PECs card, right? So it's sometimes just trying to think of what's the most economical, but it is a great way of tracking expenses and really keeping people accountable, because petty cash can be scary sometimes.
Okay, and then there's a question I have. I haven't really used Google Forms, but is there anything that you can, if you're using the forms, that you can then compile the information I don't know if Google's capable of, I'm sure they are, but
Yeah,
like if you need, all females within a certain age range
right.
for a scene, can you filter all that information by the form results that you get in?
Yeah, so for instance, when I did the call for extras and I had the 5,000 extras that submitted through the form, um, it spits all the data onto a new spreadsheet. And so I'm able to look at all those rows and columns. I can sort just like you would any other Excel spreadsheet. So if let's just say nobody signed up for this one role, but I needed people for that one role, I could still sort by, guys that are 20 to 30, and then I can start contacting them and saying, hey, I know you didn't sign up for this, but would you consider doing this specific role?
Okay. All right.
Any other questions so far?
I think that's it for now.
Okay. So moving on to Dropbox. I know a lot of people use Dropbox. A lot of people use Google Drive. I personally have a love affair with Dropbox over Google Drive only because I've had issues scanning stuff into Google Drive. I don't know if anybody else had that issue. But one thing I try to do with each production is create a detailed Dropbox folder structure that is specific to that particular production. So I'll spend several hours at the beginning of each production really thinking about, okay, for instance, this one project I was on was going to be an 11-day shoot. And so I went in and made sure that every folder that I needed multiple folders for was 11 days. And just trying to think about what type of departments am I going to have, or what unions am I going to deal with, that I can go ahead and create a system so that when you're having to deal with mounds of paperwork, your coordinator and your APOC, everybody knows where everything goes. So if there's a question about when paperwork comes in and they don't know where it goes, it creates problems, and it creates a system that is antiquated, in my opinion. Questions on Dropbox or creating? And I actually have a free Dropbox folder structure on my blog, assistantdirecting.com, that has this very folder structure. I've updated a little bit since then, but it's still pretty current. Let's see, moving on, let's see. Okay, so think about software to help you manage your tasks and notes to share with your team. And this is mostly your production team I'm talking about. Two of the ones I currently like to use are Todoist and Evernote. I was using Wunderlist for a while, but then Microsoft bought it and it became this catastrophe. And I think it's back up and working, but for a while it stopped working. So the cool thing about Todoist is I'm able to create all these different tasks, and I can see them right in front of me, and then I can assign them to a coordinator or a supervisor. And so we're all clear who's doing what. And at the beginning of each day, we're able to go through all those to-dos essentially. And what I also like about the platform is it has a iPhone app and it's an app on your desktop, but it's not something you have to log into. When you have to log into a website, sometimes those things can be painful. And the other thing about Evernote is it's another great tool where you can have notes about your project. Maybe you're going to a production meeting or a table read, and you're just taking notes throughout. And it's just really useful to sort whenever you're going on a location scout. You're like, oh, I remember I had that note here, and just trying to keep track of all your notes. Some people like to just use Word or Notes in general, and I find that those platforms don't do it for me. Any thoughts, questions on these?
Do you know, you mentioned iPhone, but do you know if these also have Android apps?
Yes, yeah, they have Android, sorry.
Oh, cool, okay.
Okay, moving on, let's see. I think we're getting toward the end of the presentation. Obviously, these are the industry standard budgeting, scheduling, Movie Magic, Final Draft. Scriptation is a really cool app for the iPad and the phone. And it really allows directors, really anybody who's making notes, to digitize their notes. So maybe you're doing a breakdown and you want to highlight things. I really encourage you to check out Scriptation. I do know, I know Steven mentioned it in the last Zoom, that the new movie Magic came out recently. Something I'm looking to explore and to play with. I'm kind of excited about one of the aspects of the new movie Magic budgeting is that I believe you'll be able to take a certain part of a budget, like let's say your location budget, and give it to the location manager where they can go in, make their updates, do their thing, without you having to go into the older movie Magic, you know, figure out what pages locations are on, export that as a PDF, and it's kind of this antiquated thing. So I'm hoping, if it's correct, that's the way it's going to work. Let's see. A couple mobile apps that I'm excited about that I use. Sun Surveyor. It's helpful knowing about when you're going to, you know, thinking about your sunset, sunrise. Scriptation I mentioned earlier. I know it sounds funny, but Uber and Lyft, I like to have my coordinator have that on their phones so that if we have to Uber an actor from the airport because the car service person was unavailable, or because of whatever reason, or maybe we're having to get a driver returned from wherever, he's dropping off a truck, he's dropping off this. Those things come in handy. Same thing with Postmates, DoorDash. Those are kind of fun apps where, okay, maybe you can send a PA out to go do a coffee run, but now you're understaffed, and it just might be easier to have that delivered through the app. Dark Sky is a great weather app. There's a big lightning app that I missed on here that I was going to put, but I forgot. GroupMe is a really cool app that a lot of productions are using to have a system for talking about stuff without using the radio. So maybe your entire AD channel has their own GroupMe channel, and they're able to talk about stuff for the PR or stuff that's not urgent, that doesn't need to be on the radio. You know, like I'm heading back with cast, you know, stuff like that. And I also know some productions have a GroupMe channel for what they might call, you know, where all the producers are on, stuff like that. Questions so far for what we've see a couple of things. Let's see. Okay, so that's me. Check out the blog, check out the podcasts. If you want to follow me on social media, that's my Instagram or Twitter or Facebook handle. Any questions about technology or software, anything we covered? Open it up right now, I guess.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I saw too, Brandon, when I was looking through your website, which I recommend anyone. It was the first time I kind of stumbled upon it a few days ago, and there's some really great stuff on there. But there were some, you had some interviews, I think, for your podcast, and also some blog posts you had mentioned about there was an alternative to movie magic budgeting, I think, for lower budget films, True Budget, that you had spoken with someone about. And I think, yeah, there was a Google, there was something G Hero or something like that. It was like a Google.
Well, yeah, so True Budget, my friend Matt Compton, he came out with this software suite for, it's mostly commercials, and it was kind of a hot cost budgeting software. The Google Casper came out last year. It was kind of in beta. It worked a little bit for me. I know they're still working on things, so I don't want to say it's positive or negative, but it is out there. And it is pretty cool what they were able to accomplish. I still think, you know, the challenge with technology right now is going to be, let's see, a lot of times, like we talked about earlier, when you're in a place that doesn't have internet, so if you're so dependent on some of this technology, which I think is great, and then you get to a location that there's nothing, and you're like, what am I going to do? So, for instance, I was using the G Suites or the Google Casper on a project, and then we were in the desert, and I had to go back to Excel because I knew it just wasn't going to handle no internet, and it was just going to slow me down all day. Yeah. What anything else? I guess.
Yeah, and then a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. Is GroupMe different from group texting? I mean, is that a specific app that everyone has to have to?
So it's similar to group texting. The problem with group texting is, if you don't have, I mean, a lot of times for me, if I'm on a group text, I can't find that group text. It's like, or if you have an iPhone, sometimes they don't work with Android. So the GroupMe is great for sorting those group text. So I think I've seen them pretty successful. A lot of times productions will have like three main texts through GroupMe. One might just be the core AD team, your first, second. The second is going to be all production, like with the PAs and everybody. And then the third will be producers and the production manager, So it just kind of having those different categories, and you can kind of look at it that way. I mean, you can also try it with different platforms like WeChat or, numerous chat programs, but GroupMe has a lot of productions that have been using it.
Okay. And you had mentioned Casper already, but someone asked, what are your thoughts on Casper, Dogzilla, or other comprehensive quote unquote software that most ADs seem to hate?
Well, the problem for me with Casper is getting it set up. Sometimes takes so much work, and it's not an easy task. I like the concept, and then the other problem is sometimes you can't get it into the format of a really extensive template. Like if you're working on a big TV show or something, it's hard to get that data to look that way, in my opinion. I could be wrong. So what was the other question about Godzilla? Or is
it was kind of a general, comprehensive software like Dogzilla or things, any thoughts on some of those comprehensive software programs? I'm personally not that familiar with it, with any of them, because I haven't used
Dogzilla. I have used several programs for call sheets. Set Hero is a great one. The only problem with Set Hero is that right now it's kind of limited to the size of the production. So if you're doing a certain level, then I think it's great. But after a certain number of people, it can become difficult to use. I know Studio Binder has kind of a call sheet thing, but some of their templates just aren't up to par, I guess.
Okay.
But they're still great for branded content, maybe commercials. But I think when we're talking about features in TV, the issue a lot of times second ADs run into is there's so much information put on these documents that all the attempts to create a digital one they're still a work in progress, in my opinion.
Okay. I don't know if you saw the message from Mike McNerney, King of Chicago, who has every software exec's direct contact, but he posted in the group chat some answers on RABs that we had asked. He said, Josh Weinberg, the founder, said, RABs has basic offline capabilities. We still recommend hotspots for the ADs. He said, we work with whatever payroll company the show prefers. And then ADs and background PAs must see physical IDs, but the RABs app ensures each digital I-9 is completed properly and verified before the BG works. With RABs, there's never a BG who isn't properly I-9'd on your set. One of the smartest benefits of their tech. And then Mike also put in Josh's email address, josh@runabetterset.com, for anybody that has any specific questions there. So thanks, Mike, for checking in with that.
And I think going back to the RABs, I mean, that's going to be a big thing when we think about this post-COVID atmosphere, is how to deal with extras, because that seems to be something that's a contentious point of, can you have 100 people close together? So trying to find solutions for that, I think, is very essential.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are some other great software ideas that are popping up in the chat. Think through scheduling. Have you heard of Think Crew scheduling? Or
I have.
If anyone has tried that.
Yes, I have heard of Think Crew scheduling. I talked to the guys at the DGA. What was it, the technology fair they had last year? It's very cool software, and you can really create a quick schedule very quickly. You're able to import your data into it. But I've not used it extensively.
Ali also mentioned Fuzzle Check, a young company, very creative, works on desktop and online, generates call sheets, and everything is exportable easily into Word or Excel or PDF. So there's another good one there. It's yeah, so many of these things I've never heard of. I feel kind of like a dinosaur, and when it comes to technology on set. Amanda, stop shaking your head. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You had also mentioned on sometimes you create a Facebook group when you start a show for department heads or for prep crew. Is that something? Something you do, or?
It depends on the show. I mean, for instance, let's say that you're in a situation where you want to do like, you're very remote and you're not able to bring your crew in right away. So you can do the 360 videos pretty easily with Facebook. And so by creating a group, Facebook is one of the few platforms that will actually display 360 video the way it's supposed to be played. So you can get your gaffer in there, your DP. I know there's companies out there that are doing virtual scouting, and they're really taking the lead into that. So you can, in the future, it'll be more prevalent where you'll put on, the VR goggles and you can walk around in the space. But that's still ways away for most of us in terms of budget. But also I've done Facebook groups for situations like the extras, where I'm trying to get volunteers in a certain low budget capacity. And so that can be a benefit there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions about any of the stuff that Brandon's talked about? It's some really...
I know I didn't mention every piece of software because there's, like I said, I'm going to leave stuff off, but I just wanted to go through some things because there might be one or two things like, hey, I haven't heard of that one, or I've never thought about using that piece that way. I think in general, as production managers, as line producers, our jobs are to solve problems. And so I'm always thinking about, well, will this piece of software solve that problem, and will it make my life easier? So, I think, yeah, it may be a pain to get the application going, like for cachet, stuff like that, but it's going to be worth it in the long run.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, yes. Go ahead, Gene.
So has anyone spoken to Movie Magic about the iPad software that they once offered? And I still have it on my old iPad. It worked great, but now they have refused to update it. Do you know if they ever plan to do it?
I don't personally know. Yeah, the movie magic scheduling one, you mean?
Yeah, it's like you can move things around on a Scout. You can
Right.
export it to your email. It was great.
I mean, since they just finished this movie magic budgeting upgrade, I think they're going to be looking to move on to scheduling, in my personal opinion, but I don't know. I can't speak for them.
Is the movie magic upgrade just for budgeting, or was it for scheduling as well?
Right. Yeah. Right now it's just for budgeting, and there's like a monthly fee, or you can do a yearly fee. And it is nice because you can upload your existing movie magic budgeting files. So you don't have to worry about losing that data. And there's a lot of cool features. I haven't really played around with it much, but I saw a demo back in January, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Pamela just sent a chat saying that EP's working on connecting all of their software and they're doing it in phases. And she also asked, Brandon, have you, or anyone, I guess, used Showbiz for cost reports connected to your budget?
I have personally not used Showbiz because I know a lot of times people use Showbiz for commercials, and I don't really work in commercials. So I'm purely a movie magic guy.
I wanted to ask you this: how do you find the crew? Like, if you start a show up, you know, and obviously when you're like a little, you know, if you're working with the same people after a while, maybe it's a little easier. But if you're trying to introduce a new crew, if you go on location somewhere to some of the tech things that you're doing, you know, I remember when you were talking about Crew Glue and said it sends a text out. There's a call sheet update, and I know there are probably some crew that would hate that. But I mean, kind of what's the feedback that you get from people when you know, have a new software or something else that they maybe haven't used or heard of before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the texting feature on Crew Glue was optional. So I would only use it if, you know, you have a big change of like, here's a blue call sheet, for instance. But right, I think there can be pushback when you're using technology because people are used to doing things a certain way, and sometimes that is, they've been doing something for the last 10, 20 years a certain way. So you're asking them to change what they're doing. So sometimes you have to convince people, you know, in a nice way, sending out an email saying, hey, just let you guys know we're going to be using this platform called Crew Glue, and it's going to have our call sheets and PRs. Well, I mean, another thing about Crew Glue I didn't mention is that you can do digital PRs. So for instance, you know how fun it is to track down out timesheets and out time from people. You can actually send out that information to department heads or whoever you deem that person to be. Maybe it's the best boy grip or the grip department, and then they would fill out the out times on their phone and upload it to Crew Glue to the digital PR that interfaces with your digital call sheet. With your, they kind of scan the back of the Excel so that's formatted. So stuff like that really eliminates the need for some PA or second to spend hours tracking down these out times. So it just, but you are having to spend that time and effort to convince people, and sometimes you can't, right? So and sometimes you have to convince a producer to purchase a set of software, you know, like, hey, can we afford Sync on Set, or can we get Crew Glue? And you have to come up with a reason, and that's not always easy either.
Right. And then, were you saying that Dark Sky is good for lightning, or was there a separate app that you liked for that?
I mean, there's several weather apps. There's a specific lightning app, and I forgot the name of it. I didn't list it on here. So, but if you just search lightning apps, I recommend having one on your phone.
Yeah, I had a good one on my iPhone, and then Matt Jansen convinced me to get a Google phone, and piece of crap, I can't find anything on it. So, anyway, but that's something for he and I.
There you go.
Uh, yeah, a couple of Christy and Kia and Robin are all mentioning some different apps as well. So
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any other big pieces of software apps that you guys would want to talk about or mention. For some reason, I'm not seeing the chat, so I'm trying to see.
it might be because you're sharing your screen. Maybe they're not
Oh,
popping up.
maybe that's why. Okay.
Yeah. But on the recording, all of the group chat, there'll be a separate chat file that everyone can access to and have all this information once the recording stops. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any other things you want to. We can open it up if anybody wants to just chime in with a question. Feel free. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, Brandon, to go through some of this stuff. Hopefully there are some good ideas out there for people to be able to take a look at, and software and technology that they weren't available, or might just help your job run a little easier. I know there's some things that I've had issues with. I'm not a fan of Synchronize or watermarking in general, but I know that's kind of the way we have to do things these days. But yeah, no,
Richard,
thank you so much for.
Thanks for putting this on. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
I have a question. If we're done,
yeah.
I am not still, I'm sorry, 100% clear with all these apps. You're working in the middle of the desert or up in the mountains of Colorado or somewhere, Death Valley. So obviously you're not connected to anything. With these apps, you're still able to input it, and then the next day or whenever you get to internet or phone access, then it will remember it all and upload it at a future date, or not?
Is there a specific app you're talking about, Jody?
Well, the apps you talked about on the first page, like extras, call sheets. I mean, you're filming in Death Valley. Can you? What do you?
Well, let's just say, okay. So those platforms, like SetKeeper, Crew Glue, most of those are going to be used by your second AD, your production coordinator. You're going to have internet somewhere at your base camp. So they're going to be, no?
No. I've been places where there's no internet in the base camp. That's what I'm wondering. If there's no internet at all.
Yeah. If there's no internet at all, I agree. That's problematic. How would you get out a call sheet anyway? You have to email. You have to go somewhere to email it. So I do think there's been times where I've had to rent satellite phones because I didn't have cell phone service, right? I don't know if I have a solution. I think you always got to have internet in your base camp. So.
Yeah, I think I would imagine, Joe, that it's probably, if there's a certain app that you want to use, it's probably app specific. Like Mike said from Rabs, you can do offline things that will then sync up, but they recommend obviously having internet. And I think that's, hopefully as more things, as we get more tech savvy on set and more people are coming out with different apps and different platforms, there will be functions for more offline that then syncs up when you actually connect to the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, so at the end of the day, when you leave the set, you drive the 2 hours to the production office, there's internet there or at the hotel, so you will it have retained the data so that someday when you get to the internet, it will then upload it, and then function? Will it hold the data until it gets to the internet?
I cannot speak to that, but I would think that most programs would have that ability.
Yeah, you may just want to check out if there's an app. Just my recommendation would be, if there's an app or software that you want to use, then that's definitely something that you'd want to check out before you commit to it, and then suddenly don't have the internet and you're relying on it to work. But I think we run into that issue a lot too, just even with our cell phones not working in certain places. And you know, I love that. I love when my cell phone doesn't work on set, because then nobody can reach me. But yeah, I think I wouldn't recommend committing your production to any one piece of software or technology without making sure it's going to work for the situation that you find within.
Yeah, and that was one thing I liked about the GroupMe app was, for instance, our radios weren't working because we were in the desert after a certain length, but the GroupMe chat would still work. So it was something that we could rely on even when the radios went out. So, but yeah, you're right. There are going to be situations where internet becomes a problem when you're dealing with technology.
Christy, did you want to ask a question or chime in?
Myself.
So you
okay, there we go. Yeah, my question is like, all right, so suddenly now I'm not only dealing with the whole interaction of the ever-changing step, but I've got like 17 apps on my phone. Do you ever find that it's a little more cumbersome because you now have information in all these different points? You know, is there a lost in translation because you're actually not interfacing and having conversations with the crew? Or have you found that's not an issue at all? That they're all compartmentalized and you don't have to fight, you know, searching and digging through different apps?
Well, I mean, I don't use that many iPhone apps. I think most of the stuff I was recommending is more software or stuff on the just platforms on my computer. I think for me, going back to just some of these apps, it's just common day apps like Uber, you know, and weather apps. But I don't. Can you rephrase your question? Maybe I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
I'm just saying, like in terms of you know, the group me's and the you know, sending in your out times and things like that, like, you know, and then sending in crew updates. You know, I really enjoy the face-to-face. I mean, I always back it up with something to document it in writing. But for me, I get a lot more information when I actually have a conversation with somebody as opposed to like, you know, communicating via some third-party app. I don't know. I guess it's like, I guess you said like a lot of people don't like change. I'm old school. So I hate the group chats. I hate all that stuff. Just talk to me. But yeah, I guess my question is like, you don't find that things are lost in translation and lost places you didn't remember to look?
Well, yeah, and I think there is like the benefit to, you know, like sometimes when you have an office, physical office, you're coming in to talk to a producer or production manager and maybe somebody on the crew, like, I'm turning my time card, but also I forgot to tell you about this, you know, and there's this physical interaction. I agree completely. I'm just presenting right now the tools, you know, that I think that can solve a lot of problems. But I think, you know, especially when we're trying to limit interaction right now, we really have to think about how can we do that safely. And these are some of the tools we should use. But I agree. There's a lot of benefit to human interaction and really trying to make contact with people on your crew and see how things are going versus just everything email, digital.
Yeah, I think it's also, you know, obviously important for everyone to kind of keep using what works for you, you know, and if you're, but I think like Brandon says, there may be a point possibly in the near future when we're all trying to figure out how to come back from set, and if the producer or the production manager, you know, says, hey, we got to figure out ways that we can all interact not so physically in certain areas, then, you know, some of these programs and some of these different apps could be very helpful in that regard. You know, I mean, I know I had problems getting people to go from Excel to numbers at one point. So I think it's, you know, everyone can be a little standoffish, especially when there's new tech involved, but it might be worthwhile. I'm definitely going to check some of these things out and just play around with them now, so that if I'm coming back to a set, you know, 6 months from now or whenever we get back to work, and they're asking, you know, well, how can we do this or how can we do that? You know, at least I have some ideas of, hey, there's this software program that can do so-and-so, or we can use Google Forms for the background, you know, whatever that may be. Brandon, one question. Do you know if GroupMe has a desktop interface, or is it mobile only?
It's mobile only. I mean, I do like the way it handles notifications better than other chat platforms. So, but yeah, it's mobile only.
Yeah, I wonder, Matt asked the question because, you know, like he uses WhatsApp, but he says it doesn't work on a browser or a desktop. So I wonder if there is, other than like Facebook Messenger or something where you have to be actually connected, if there is a program that you can go from iPhone to Android, or and use the computer and use, you know, use a chat message for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you could try Slack. I've tried it before, but it just didn't work with the notifications for me.
Skype works on all of them.
Yeah.
Which one?
Skype, it's a thing you could either do text messaging or you can have a video conference. It's international. It's called SKYPE, Skype. It works on the computer. It works on the phone. You can do conference calls. You can do group chat. Skype, SKYPE. It's been around for at least 15 years.
Yeah, I've had Skype. I didn't know you could use it as a text platform. So that's interesting. So you could text through the phone or on the, if you're sitting at the desktop or on your laptop?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've done both. And it's been around forever. And it's very, I mean, it's made by Microsoft. It's solid. It doesn't go out.
Interesting. All right. Well, oh, and Matt, Ali is saying you can get WhatsApp on your computer. So.
Oh, you can? That's great.
Yeah. All right. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this stuff with us. I really appreciate it. I'll send out the link to the recording for everybody. And, you know, everyone stay safe. Hope you're all doing well. If anyone has any other questions before we take off, feel free to chime in and ask. But yeah, I'm enjoying doing this every week and being able to see people and have a little bit of camaraderie and, you know.
Thanks, Richard. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard, for doing this.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Brandon. It was very useful. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Richard and Brandon.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Brandon.